Welcome to the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. Today, we're going to be exploring how the principles of life itself can actually help us lead and create these thriving organizations.
Interesting topics.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
And you've given us some really thought-provoking sources for this deep dive.
I tried to pick some good ones.
Yeah, including excerpts from Matthias or Bonsen's book, Leading with Life.
That's a great one.
We're going to try to uncover how natural systems and human behavior and even energy itself are all connected.
Right.
When it comes to building successful businesses.
That's the goal.
Yeah, and you're aiming to really understand Bonsen's model for how organizations work and how to effectively lead them. So let's get into it. One of the first things that struck me was Bonsen's argument about patterns in nature. You know, things like self-organization, interconnectedness, even chaos, being mirrored in successful organizations.
Interesting.
It's like nature has this blueprint for success, and we can learn from it.
Yeah, think about Peter Vail's research on high-performing teams.
Okay, everything from hospital trauma units to Coast Guard cutters.
Wow.
He found that when these groups were at their best, they operated with this kind of sense of flow or groove, kind of like a jazz band, like a perfectly in-sync jazz band.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, and he described it as being geliert.
Geliert.
Yeah, it's German.
Okay, so it's like that feeling of being in the zone as a team.
Exactly.
Right, where everything just clicks. Have you ever experienced that kind of flow state where teamwork seems effortless and everyone's on the same wavelength?
Oh, yeah, for sure. What's fascinating is that Vail's research suggested it's not just about individual skill.
Oh, interesting.
Exceptional performance was often linked to a surge of energy that propelled the group forward, a real sense of vitality.
Wow, so that makes me think about Sir Bonsen's challenge to shift our thinking away from viewing organizations as machines and instead seeing them as these living systems.
Yes.
He suggests that management theory has been stuck in this mechanistic worldview for centuries. Yeah, we've inherited so many ideas from, brilliant minds like Galileo, Descartes, and Newton, who helped us understand the world by breaking it down into parts.
Right.
But that approach also led to this belief that everything, including organizations, could be understood and controlled like a machine.
Which brings us to Taylorism, right?
Yes.
That management approach focused on efficiency and standardization, like an assembly line.
Exactly.
But Bonsen critiques Taylorism for being too limited.
And he points out that even the informal structures in organizations can unintentionally reinforce those machine-like limitations.
Oh, interesting.
It's like people get so focused on their defined roles and procedures that they lose sight of the bigger picture.
So if organizations are truly living systems, then how does that change the way we think about leadership?
That's the big question.
Yeah, and this is where Bonsen introduces this idea of an energy field.
Right.
That every organization have, something you can sense, but not always see. It's a bit of a head-scratcher, isn't it?
It might sound a little mystical, but think about it this way. This field is shaped by the stories employees and leaders tell each other, creating a shared reality.
Okay.
These stories can be positive or negative, inspiring or limiting, and they become embedded in the organization's collective consciousness.
He gives an example in the book about a company that kept telling itself it was a world champion.
Oh, yeah.
While customer experiences told a very different story. It's like living in a bubble of self-deception.
Yeah.
How can leaders tap into an organization's true potential if those stories aren't aligned with reality?
That disconnect can be incredibly damaging. It's like trying to navigate with a faulty compass. Leaders need to be aware of the narratives within their organization and ensure they reflect the truth.
So how do leaders tap into the real energy of an organization? Bonsen emphasizes connecting with what he calls the true will of the organization.
It's about uncovering that deeper purpose and passion. He suggests asking 4 key questions to get to the heart of this true will. First, what unique benefit does the organization passionately want to provide to its customers?
Interesting.
It goes beyond just making a profit. It's about understanding the unique value they offer.
The second question is, how does the organization want to serve humanity? What's its higher purpose?
Right. It's about understanding how the organization fits into the larger context, its contribution to the world.
The third question is about values. What values are truly inspiring to its people? What do they deeply believe in?
And finally, what energizes the people in the organization? What makes them excited to come to work every day?
Asking those 4 questions can spark some serious reflection. I'm thinking about that inspiring story Sir Bonsen shares about Gottlieb Duttweiler, the founder of Migros, a Swiss supermarket chain.
Duttweiler was driven by a desire to truly transform the Swiss food system, advocating for fairness, health, and supporting local farmers.
Wow.
He wasn't just focused on profit, he wanted to make a real difference.
He even turned Migros into a cooperative owned by its customers. That's walking the talk. It's a powerful example of aligning an organization with its core values leading to success. But what about the practical side of things? How do we create structures and systems that support this kind of vitality and passion within organizations?
That's a great question. It leads us to an important concept called kyusei. Have you ever heard of it?
Kyusei. No, this is a new one for me. Tell me more.
It's a Japanese term that means living and working together for the common good.
Okay.
And Canon, the technology company, actually uses this as a guiding principle.
So how does that actually play out in a company like Canon? How do they put this principle into practice?
They apply it both internally with their employees and externally with their customers, suppliers, and even competitors.
Wow.
It's about fostering a shared purpose and collaboration that extends beyond the traditional boundaries of the organization.
It's like expanding that circle of we, right?
Exactly.
Not just thinking about ourselves, but also considering the well-being of the whole ecosystem.
Canon sees themselves as part of a larger system, recognizing that their success is interconnected with the well-being of everyone involved. This highlights the importance of empathy in leadership. Rizaburo Kaku, who led Canon for many years, believes that leaders who've experienced being outside the mainstream often have a greater capacity for empathy and understanding.
That makes a lot of sense. When you've experienced being marginalized or different yourself, it can be easier to connect with and understand the perspectives of others.
Right.
It helps build a sense of community and belonging within an organization, recognizing and valuing everyone's unique experiences.
And this is where organizational structure comes into play. Bonsen argues that the very structure of an organization can either support or hinder its vitality.
Okay.
He uses the example of Svenska Handelsbanken, a Swedish bank that defied conventional wisdom by decentralizing power and giving its branches a significant level of autonomy.
So they're pushing decision-making power down to those closest to the action, the people who are closest to the customers. What's fascinating is that this approach has been incredibly successful for Svenska Handelsbanken. They consistently outperform their peers in terms of profitability and customer satisfaction.
That's true.
What are some of the specific practices that set them apart?
One that I find particularly intriguing is their use of self-selected mentors. Instead of assigning mentors, they allow employees to choose their own mentors from within the organization, fostering genuine connections and relationships based on mutual respect and trust.
It's not about forcing people into a rigid hierarchy, but about creating a more organic and supportive environment for learning and development. It reminds me of the Council of the Wise that Sir Bonsen mentions. Tell me more about that.
It's a group of experienced employees who act as advisors and provide guidance and support to the bank's leadership.
Interesting.
They're a valuable resource for tapping into the collective wisdom and experience of the organization.
It sounds like they're creating a structure that allows for the flow of knowledge and experience throughout the organization, breaking down traditional silos.
And this approach to structure shares a lot in common with the principles of open space technology, a method for facilitating meetings and workshops where the agenda emerges organically from the participants' passions and interests. It's about trusting the collective wisdom of the group to identify the most important topics and create a meaningful and productive dialogue.
It's almost like they're applying the principles of self-organization and emergence that we see in nature to the way they structure their organization.
Exactly.
It's about creating an environment where people can connect, collaborate, and co-create solutions that benefit everyone involved.
Precisely. This is a key takeaway from Sir Bonsen's work. By aligning our organizational structures with the patterns of life, we can unlock enormous potential for creativity, innovation, and engagement. It's about moving beyond the limitations of the machine metaphor and embracing the dynamic, interconnected nature of organizations as living systems.
Powerful stuff.
Indeed.
We were just talking about Svenska Handelsbanken and their decentralized structure.
It's fascinating how they embrace decentralization and trust their employees to make decisions.
And that really connects with the idea of open space technology.
Absolutely.
We touched on it earlier. Both emphasize self-organization. In open space, participants set the agenda based on their passions.
Right.
Just like Svenska Handelsbanken empowers its branches to make choices
Yeah.
based on their local knowledge and customer relationships.
It's all about tapping into that collective wisdom and energy of the group
Right.
instead of forcing a rigid top-down structure.
Which leads to the question, how do leaders create the conditions for this type of self-organization to actually flourish?
That's a great question.
Bonsen talks about connecting with an organization's true will.
Right.
But how do leaders actually do that?
Yeah.
It's not like there's a step-by-step guide.
It does feel like a bit of a mystery.
It does.
Well, he suggests a few practices that can help. One is to have regular gatherings with teams that go beyond just business updates.
Yeah.
Create space for deeper conversations
Yeah.
about purpose, values, and what truly inspires people.
Like those campfire gatherings you mentioned before.
Yes, exactly.
Where people can share stories and connect on a more human level.
And it's important to make those gatherings a consistent part of the organizational culture,
Right.
not just a one-off event.
It's about keeping that flame of passion and purpose burning bright.
Another practice is to use storytelling to reinforce the values and vision of the organization.
Okay.
Remember that example we discussed earlier about the company that claimed to be a world champion,
Oh, yeah.
while their customers had a completely different experience?
It's a good reminder that leaders need to be vigilant
Yes.
about making sure the stories being told within the organization
Right.
align with reality.
They have to be willing to challenge those dissonant stories.
So they need to become storytellers themselves.
Yes, weaving narratives that inspire and uplift, connecting people to the deeper meaning of their work.
And those stories have to be authentic,
Absolutely.
not just empty slogans or marketing fluff.
Along with that, it's crucial to celebrate successes, both big and small.
That makes sense.
Celebrating successes is a great way to recognize and acknowledge the hard work of everyone in the organization.
Right.
It's about fostering a culture of appreciation
Yeah.
and giving people that much-needed boost of energy and motivation.
It doesn't have to be anything elaborate or expensive.
No, not at all.
It's about finding those meaningful ways to mark milestones and acknowledge people's contributions.
When you think about all these practices together,
Yeah.
it seems like a lot of it comes down to creating an environment where people feel valued, connected, and inspired.
It's about building a culture that feels aligned with life itself. Growth, connection, and purpose.
And that brings us to another interesting concept from Bonsen.
Okay.
The importance of creating structures that allow for emergence.
Emergence. Can you explain what that means in this context?
Think about how complex systems arise from simply interactions in nature.
Okay.
A flock of birds, for example.
They move as one, even though there's no single bird in charge.
There's no central control, yet the flock displays incredible coordination. That's emergence in action.
So applying that to organizations means?
Creating structures that are flexible and adaptable,
Okay.
where new ideas and initiatives can bubble up organically.
That reminds me of Svenska Handelsbanken again.
Yes.
How they give so much autonomy to their branches.
It's a great example. Decentralized structures can truly foster emergence. And it's not just about the structure itself, it's also about the culture. Leaders need to create an environment where people feel safe to take risks, experiment, and share their ideas freely.
So it's about nurturing a spirit of experimentation and innovation.
Exactly.
And that requires trust from leadership.
It does.
It's about letting go of the need to micromanage
Right.
and trusting people to do their best work.
When people feel trusted, they're more likely to be creative, take initiative, and really go above and beyond.
It's about empowering people to bring their full selves to work.
And when that happens, the whole organization benefits.
Yeah.
You see more innovation, more collaboration, and ultimately greater success.
We've explored a lot of inspiring ideas so far.
We have.
But let's be realistic. Not every organization is starting from scratch.
Of course, many organizations are already established
Right.
with existing structures and cultures.
So that doesn't mean they can't benefit from these principles.
Absolutely not.
So how can leaders begin to shift the culture of an existing organization towards more vitality?
It starts with awareness.
Okay.
Leaders need to be mindful of the stories being told within their organization, the energy field that's being created.
They need to ask themselves, what are the dominant narratives?
Exactly.
Are they aligned with the values and vision we aspire to?
If there are dissonant stories, they need to be addressed.
Right.
This might involve challenging long-held assumptions.
Okay. Or confronting uncomfortable truths.
So it's about having the courage to face reality,
Yeah.
even when it's difficult.
And being open to letting go of old ways of doing things
Yeah.
that no longer serve the organization.
It's about embracing new possibilities, new ways of leading and organizing.
That openness is key to creating a culture of continuous learning and improvement. Leaders have to be willing to experiment, try new approaches, and even learn from their mistakes.
It's about fostering a spirit of curiosity and exploration.
And creating structures that support that kind of experimentation.
Right.
This might involve giving teams more autonomy, encouraging collaboration across different departments, or providing platforms for people to share their ideas.
It's about moving away from those rigid hierarchical structures towards more fluid, organic systems.
And empowering individuals to take ownership of their work and contribute their unique talents and perspectives.
This all sounds great, but how can leaders actually implement these changes? Especially in large, complex organizations. It can feel incredibly overwhelming.
That's where the power of large group gatherings comes in. Bonsen is a big advocate for using these types of events to create a shared sense of purpose, generate new ideas, and energize the organization.
He shares some compelling examples in the book.
He does.
Like the story of Tex Gunning, who turned around Unilever's struggling Unox division by using large group events to build a culture of quality and customer focus.
It's not just about getting people in the same room. It's about creating a space where they can connect, share their stories, and tap into their collective wisdom.
It's about fostering a shared sense of purpose and possibility.
Exactly.
Bonsen describes these large group gatherings as a way to reignite the spirit of the organization.
I like that.
It's like they provide a jolt of energy
Yeah.
that can help break down old patterns and create new possibilities.
And that energy can then be channeled into positive change. So Bonsen talks about using these events to establish a shared vision for the future.
It's like painting a picture of what the organization can become.
Right.
What's possible.
And inspiring people to believe in that vision and work together to make it a reality.
That's the goal.
But it's not enough to just have a single event, right?
Of course not. That's just the starting point.
Leaders need to find ways to sustain that energy and momentum over time.
How can they do that?
That's the question.
It might involve creating smaller follow-up groups, establishing new rituals and practices, or finding ways to integrate the insights and ideas generated at the event into the day-to-day operations of the organization.
It's about ensuring that the energy generated at these events doesn't just fade away, but translates into real lasting change.
And that requires ongoing effort and commitment from leadership.
So it's not just checking a box. It's about embedding these principles into the very fabric of the organization.
Leading with life.
Seeing the organization as a living system that needs to be nurtured and cultivated.
And recognizing that leadership itself is a living process, a journey of continuous learning and growth.
This deep dive has been so rich and insightful.
It has.
We've explored so many powerful ideas.
Lots of great stuff.
About how the principles of life can shape the way we lead and create thriving organizations.
And we've only just scratched the surface of Bonsen's work. There's still so much to uncover in Leading with Life. From the idea of creating a social architecture that supports vitality to the power of the medicine wheel as a framework for leadership.
We'll be back in a few to wrap things up.
Sounds good.
And leave you with some thought-provoking questions to ponder.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been on quite a journey exploring this idea of leading with life, haven't we?
It really has been. It challenges us to see organizations in a whole new light.
Not as those static machines, but as dynamic living systems.
Right, exactly. Before we went to the break, we were talking about those large group gatherings and how they can be these powerful catalysts for change. But Bonsen also emphasizes the importance of structure.
He does. He introduces this fascinating idea of social architecture, which is all about intentionally designing the structures and systems of an organization in a way that supports human flourishing.
It's like we become architects, not just of physical spaces, but of the environments where people come together to work and create.
Just as a well-designed building can inspire and uplift, so can a well-designed organization.
So what are the key principles then of this social architecture? What should we be aiming for?
Well, it's about creating structures that foster connection, collaboration, and creativity. We need to move away from those rigid hierarchies we often see in organizations and towards more fluid, organic systems.
So instead of those traditional top-down pyramids, it's more like a web or a network.
Think of it as a living, breathing ecosystem where information and ideas can flow freely and people can connect and collaborate in a more dynamic way.
That reminds me of what we discussed earlier about the importance of diversity and interconnectedness.
Absolutely. It's not just about having a diverse workforce.
Right.
It's about creating a culture that genuinely values those diverse perspectives and creates the conditions where they can truly thrive.
So it's about recognizing that everyone has a unique contribution to make.
Yeah.
But how do we start to design these more life-giving structures? It feels like a daunting task,
It can.
especially if you're in a large, established organization.
Bonsen suggests we look to nature for inspiration. Think about a forest, for example,
Okay.
where different species coexist and thrive within a complex web of relationships.
Each species has its unique role to play
Right.
in the overall health and balance of the ecosystem.
And that same principle can be applied to organizations.
How so?
Instead of trying to fit everyone into the same mold, we can design structures that allow individuals to play to their strengths and contribute their unique talents and perspectives.
It's about recognizing that everyone has their own medicine to offer, their own way of contributing to the well-being of the whole.
That's a great way to put it. And it's about shifting from a mindset of control to a mindset of cultivation.
Okay.
Instead of trying to micromanage every detail, we focus on cultivating the unique talents and passions of the people within the organization.
I love that idea. Shifting from control to cultivation.
Yeah.
It feels much more aligned with the principles of life itself.
Speaking of which, this leads us to the medicine wheel, a concept that Bonsen borrows from Native American traditions.
I'm really curious about this. What is the medicine wheel, and how does it apply to leadership?
The medicine wheel is a powerful symbol of wholeness and balance.
Okay.
It represents the four directions: north, south, east, and west, and the four aspects of ourselves: the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual.
So it's about integrating all aspects of ourselves.
Yes.
Not just focusing on one or two.
And this principle extends to leadership as well.
Interests me.
Bonsen suggests that truly effective leaders need to cultivate all four aspects of the medicine wheel.
So it's not just about being strong and decisive.
Yeah.
What we might think of as the warrior aspect.
Right. It's also about being visionary, compassionate, and wise.
Okay.
Bonsen actually assigns each of these aspects to a direction on the medicine wheel.
Oh, interesting.
The north represents the warrior, the east represents the visionary, the south represents the healer, and the west represents the teacher.
So each direction has its own unique medicine to offer.
Yes.
Its own set of qualities that are essential for effective leadership. Can you give us an example of what those qualities might look like in practice?
Sure. The warrior brings strength and courage, the ability to take action and overcome challenges.
Okay.
The visionary brings inspiration and foresight, the ability to see the big picture and chart a course for the future. The healer brings compassion and empathy, the ability to connect with people on a deeper level and create a sense of belonging.
And the teacher.
The teacher brings wisdom and knowledge, the ability to share insights and guide others along their path.
It's a beautiful framework for thinking about leadership.
Yeah.
And it really challenges us to move beyond those one-dimensional views
I agree.
of what it means to be a leader.
Effective leadership requires a balance of all these qualities.
Right.
And the medicine wheel gives us a roadmap for cultivating that balance within ourselves.
So how can we use the medicine wheel then to become more effective leaders?
Yeah.
Where do we even begin?
Well, it starts with self-awareness.
Okay.
We need to take an honest look at our own strengths and weaknesses and identify which aspects of the medicine wheel come more naturally to us and which ones might require more conscious effort to cultivate.
So it's about identifying where we might be over-indexing on one direction of the medicine wheel.
Exactly.
And where we might need to develop those other aspects.
It's a lifelong journey of continuous learning and growth, of becoming more conscious and intentional in our approach to leadership.
This has been an incredible deep dive. We've explored so much.
We have.
From the idea of organizations as living systems to the power of true will and kyosei, to the importance of designing those life-giving structures and cultivating the medicine wheel in our own leadership.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
I know, right?
Bonsen's Leading with Life is full of wisdom and insights for anyone who wants to create a more human-centered and purposeful world of work.
As we wrap up this episode, we want to leave you with a thought-provoking question inspired by the medicine wheel. How can you bring more of the warrior, the visionary, the healer, and the teacher into your own leadership approach?
It's something to really think about.
We encourage you to reflect on this question and to share your own aha moments or any follow-up questions you might have.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into leading with life.
It's been a pleasure.
See you next time on the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. Until next time.
See you then.